Everyone, Delta1 here. I'm making this video to try to help someone out on diagnosing an issue. I made a video a while back about the ASD relay, and the reason I made that video is I was in the process of getting my flooded RAM operational. I'm gonna just touch on that and explain how that works. The ASD relay, in essence, powers specific key electronics in the vehicle to allow it to only operate under certain conditions. These conditions is usually not when the key is in the on position, but when it's in the run position. Stuff like your fuel pump runs off of this, your computer gets powered off of this in that specific position. It's why you can't, I don't know why I'm yelling. It's why you can't actually diagnose your computer with a scan tool with it in the on position. It has to be in the run position, because your computer does not get power until the ASD relay is on to be powered in the, unless it's in the run position. Here's the thing. The ASD relay can be powered on one of three ways. It can be powered on with, like my 2003 RAM did not have a chip in the key. So it didn't have an anti-theft or tampering. I'm not saying that no 03 RAMs come with it. I'm just saying that my model did not come with it, the ones I've had. Basically, you turn the key to the on position, everything comes on, and it starts. You also have some vehicles that have an anti-theft module, and you have some vehicles that have an immobilizer. Now, anti-theft and immobilizers are loosely thrown terms, but in retrospect, a anti-theft device is not an immobilizer. They're two different types of equipment to do the exact same thing. An anti-theft module is essentially an interrupter, where it will, if it doesn't get what it wants, it doesn't send that signal off to the to whatever computer it needs to run. Well, it won't send that run signal. Whereas newer vehicles like my 14 RAM, it doesn't use an anti-theft device. It uses an immobilizer. Now, the immobilizer, the reason it's different from a the general reason of why it's different from a anti-theft device is because an immobilizer, essentially what it does, it's not focused anywhere. There we go. An immobilizer communicates with multiple different things in order to operate. So in my case, in the 14 RAM, my chip in the key goes in, even without me turning the key on or off. Sticking it in the ignition, it communicates with the frequency module in the back of the truck, which also communicates with the body control module, which also communicates with the computer. The computer cannot be accessed without the ASD module on, but the computers can communicate with each other on its bus network. When you turn it to the on and the run position, the immobilizer is even kicked into another high gear when it now can talk to the body control module and talk to the TIPM, which Dodge calls their fuse box, intelligent fuse box. It talks to that module, and then that module can be turned on because it now has communicated with the immobilizer in the truck, which is a congruent or a conjunction of different modules together to say, okay, this is the right code, and then we'll send that signal to the computer, which is now powered on through the intelligent fuse box to turn on the computer. Now, your ASD module will not actually turn on the computer. Your ASD module only turns on specific things in the computer. In general retrospect, the ASD module is usually powered by the computer. Usually what happens is your immobilizer, your anti-theft module, communicates directly to the computer, and the computer will turn on and off the ASD relay, which is usually located in the fuse box, where it's either a physical relay or circuit board relay. That's what turns on. And this is how you would Okay, I have too many radios on in the office. I think I have that on or I have it off. Okay. Turn that one down. Okay. That way I can only hear mine. Essentially what happens is if your ASD relay is not operating, one of two things are happening. Either you're I'm going to use the term immobilizer because, like I said, it's loosely used on an anti-theft and an immobilizer. It's loosely through because they do the exact same thing, just in a different way. But if your immobilizer is not sending the signal to the computer to tell the ASD relay to turn on, you won't get things to come on like your fuel pump. Now, yes, some vehicles have it to where it will turn the fuel pump on without the ASD relay. To get that further into it, you have to get your own vehicle's wiring diagram and see what the ASD relay powers. In my case, in the 14 Ram, the ASD relay powers the fuel pump. So when I was diagnosing my truck, when I would turn the key on, it would not power the fuel pump. Also, it wasn't recognizing the key. Well, basically, the key and the module were the right thing. They were tied together, but it wasn't tied with the body control module and the computer. So the reason I could get all these power things to come on was because the immobilizer and the key worked. So it would send signal, but it would not turn the ASD relay on because the computer was not being told to come on. So again, that's what an anti-theft would do anyway. But the immobilizer isn't in effect because I don't have all the pieces of equipment in it. Now, when I went back to the salvage yard and got the body control module from the exact same truck and put that in there, now it communicated with the body control module, the RF module, and the key. So now it was sending a signal to the computer to tell the computer, okay, you can turn the ASD module on. Now, this ASD module now powers on the fuel pump and powers on everything else. Now, here's where an anti-theft and an immobilizer differs. Now that I had a key, the body control module, and the RF module were all from the same truck, it would now turn the ASD module on and try to start the truck. But what it would not do is it would not turn on the ignition module. And the reason it wouldn't do that is because the ignition module is powered through the ASD module. However, there's a secondary relay inside of there that will only power if the computer sees that it has the right code. This is where it's kind of hard to diagnose these vehicles without a scan tool, because newer cars do not communicate via a signal wire anymore. They communicate through bus wires, and that's how it tells, hey, you know, you have the right code. Does this compare with your code? If it does, hey, go ahead and turn this on. If you're having an issue with your ASD module not powering on, the very simplest thing to do is to get your wiring diagram and see where your ASD module gets its power from. Like I said, most of them get their power from the computer. But you also want to see what other things are powered by that computer, because at that point you can see, all right, what other things on this module does it power? And if even one of those things that it powers on, your issue isn't the ASD module. But more than likely, if your ASD module is not powering on, you can forget that and go straight to your computer. Now, what you would do at your computer is not rule it being the computer. You would first test to see if the immobilizer or the anti-theft is telling the computer that it can run, because your computer does not get a power and ground from anything in most cases. In most cases, your computer generates its own power and its own ground to send out. That's where you get your 5-volt reference from. And a good way for you to understand this is if I hook a computer-controlled power to a ground anywhere on the truck, that piece of equipment will not work, because the computer is sending that power, so the computer would have to send the ground. And that's how my headlights work on my truck, and that's how my aftermarket floodlight works on my truck. That's how my light bar works on my truck. It has to get a computer-controlled a ground and a computer controlled positive from the actual computer in order to power that system. Now, if I hook directly to the battery, all I need to do is ground it anywhere on the truck. So your computer doesn't rely on getting a ground from anything else. Now, obviously, yes, there is a ground to the truck via the connections that go into it. Some of them actually use the ground of the body of the truck where it bolts in at for it, but usually it's inside of the actual wiring harness. It will ground to the negative side of the trucks in some form or fashion. But stuff that controls your computers will generally be generated by the actual module itself in order for it to operate. So, for instance, your 12-volt reference will not use the, I guess the 12-volt reference is not a good example. Like the headlights on my truck uses the computer, the body control module's computer, to turn the headlights on. So I cannot ground my headlight to the ground of the truck because it will not turn on. I have to ground it through a ground that's supplied by the computer in order for it to work. So when you're testing powers and grounds on the computer, you have to be sure you're checking the powers and grounds via the computer's ground. And if you're checking like your anti-theft, or you're looking for powers and grounds not from the computer but going to the computer, usually the computer will see if it's ground switch, it's looking for a ground to come from the immobilizer. If it's, you know, an older model that looks for a positive or looks for a ground, for it to tell it, okay, everything's fine, rock and roll. That doesn't work on newer vehicles like my Ram because it uses a CAN bus system to tell it to operate. So the powers and grounds are generally utilized through the actual module itself and then sent over a CAN bus. But in retrospect, to diagnose whether or not if it's your computer or if it's your anti-theft, usually you would start at your anti-theft and verify that your anti-theft module has powers, it has grounds, and it has an output. On newer vehicles, they use an immobilizer, and the immobilizer will have a positive, it'll have a ground, and depending on who makes it or how newer it is, it'll either have a signal out or it'll have a CAN bus system, and what you're looking for is there to be activity on the line when it's doing that. There is a more rough draft of this, a more detail of this, but that's just a rough draft to try to get you out of the hole. There is in most cases, most cars have the ability to, like a rough draft check to see if your vehicle can bypass that module, to check to see if it works. I think the ones that can do this, I think, are Chevys generally can do this. The older Chevys with the chip that's on the key, not in the key. Well, in the key, not on the key. It uses resistance to measure the immobilizer. Generally, you can do it that way, but other vehicles don't actually work that way. But it's just a hindsight to be able to try to figure out what module to shoot for. Again, I don't like ruling the computer as being the issue. I have never gone to a computer and gone, that's my issue. I've always gone to where my source issue was and then worked my way back. Now, you can shortcut that and go straight to the computer and check. You can actually work either way, backwards and forwards, but it depends on the actual cause of the issue will determine if it's faster to go from the computer out or from the source in. But that's generally what you'll have to work on when you're trying to get your ASD module to operate right, dealing with a immobilizer or dealing with an anti-theft. So I am going to, I think it's almost time for my break to end, because this is almost a 15-minute video, so I think I have like less than 15 minutes left. So peace.